Hello, and welcome back to Mini Adventures Mini. So this week I'm doing another Artisan Guild miniature. I know I've been doing a lot of those lately, but ever since I got my 3D printer and started printing stuff and I found their stuff, I've just been in love with all of their sculpts. It's really hard to find anything that is that fun to have and paint that you can get at the price point that they offer, with even with the added difficulty of having to figure out how to get it all printed out. So I've just been really just becoming a major fan of all of their things. So I'm going to leave it at that. So this week I'm painting another miniature from the Gold Maw Lizard set that came out this November. This one is a Sky Terror. It sometimes has a rider that is an optional character to put on it, but I decided to do it as is since it looks a lot like a D&D Wyvern when you don't have the rider on it. It has a few different head options and whatnot. I went with the one I liked the most. The main difference between the Sky Terror from this set and a Dungeons and Dragons Wyvern is that the Wyvern tends to have like a poisonous stinger on the tail, which this one doesn't, but that's a pretty minor detail in this case, so it's not that big of a deal. But in the case of D&D, it works great. It's the classic legs, wings, but no additional limbs, and it's just the right size to be used for a wyvern in D&D at its default scale, and it looks great. I'm probably thinking I might print up two or three more of them, paint in different colors with different heads, maybe mirror it when I print it so that they look a little bit different, and just have fun with a little squadron of wyverns. I think that might be a lot of fun. But there's enough with that, so let's go ahead and I'll jump in and show you how I painted it this week. Alright, so here we've got the initial sculpt. This is after I've gotten it printed out and assembled and done the majority of the cleanup that I need to do. There's still a little bit more cleanup that I'll tackle before we get started in on the full painting, but for the most part this is what it looks like when it's just the raw plastic. Or I guess you could say resin since it's the resin printer. But like I was saying, this is a pretty cool miniature from the Lizard set. I just love the sculpt. I think it looks great. So the first thing I did is I primed it and I did this zenithal underlayer. This is my normal method of doing a layer of black and then medium gray at a 45-degree angle and then white at a 90-degree angle to get a nice smooth transition of light to shadow. And then I'm coming in with this Blood Angels Red Citadel contrast paint. Again, I'm still playing around seeing if I like how this contrast paint works with the zenithal method. Overall, I do like it. It seems to get me some good effects so far, at least with like this red and green that I've played with so far. I'll have to see where I get with other colors in the future and how that goes, but overall this does exactly what I want it to. Maybe not as clean as I might want it to, but it kind of saves me steps because I would normally do like a base coat and then a wash and then have to clean up the wash. Whereas this is kind of just like a base coat and wash all in one, though it can be a little more fiddly than that sometimes, so I don't know, we'll just have to play with it. And I did have a few issues when I was coming through with this, because I'm using inks to do the zenithal coat applied with an airbrush. Part of the problem that I run into is that the inks don't like set super well. They need to be left for a long time, and I had left these ones sitting for a solid 2 hours to try and let them properly dry and cure. But you can see just there on that wing, a bit of the white came off after it had been sitting under the contrast paint for too long, which kind of ruined some of the bright effect there. I try and salvage it later with mixed results and whatnot, but that's something that I wasn't really expecting, that the very wet contrast paint would cause that effect. So I'm thinking what I'll probably do in the future to help counteract that is I'm going to try two methods. I want to let it sit for maybe like a full day just to let it cure, and properly set up, and then hopefully it won't get lifted. But the other method I want to try is doing just a thin layer of varnish on the undercoat before I start putting color on, to see if that helps protect my undercolor layer, so that I don't have any of my upper layers of inks coming off when I'm trying to apply things like contrast paints. And here in this step, I'm trying out some more stuff with these artists' inks. I had noticed before that they were pretty good at glazing, so I wanted to see if I could turn these wings to a slightly different color of red, just like tint it towards the yellow spectrum, and see what I got. And I was kind of hopeful when I first started doing this. It seemed like it was kind of working, but then it just started going downhill. It just started looking muddier and muddier with these very vibrant, bright patches of yellow, which is not at all what I had been looking for when I was doing this. And I just kept going, trying to see if I could salvage it. It was like even worse on the underside, though I think the undersides end up looking better than the top, probably because I work them in less. But you'll see how it's going. This is, again, I'm just not all that familiar with inks, and so I was trying to play around and learn some of the properties of it, and this is not the best method of using it. I think it's probably just because there's too much of an irregular surface on these wings, so it was acting too much like a wash and receding into the recesses, which I did not want. I wanted more of like an even distribution that would just kind of tint everything. I did put it in like the creases up here on the head, and I did kind of like how that looked. It adds a little bit of color variation up there without being too intrusive, so I feel like that worked well, just intentionally leaving a bright color in the recesses since it was easy to apply that way, and that was exactly what I wanted. And then I've got the matte black and mummy robes here that I use just to paint in the eyes. This is my usual method, not very difficult, and because the eyes of this Wyvern are bigger than most miniatures that I'm working with, it's even easier than normal. Just get that coat of black in there to settle as a starting point, get the white in there, and then any black sitting around the edges just serves to outline them and make them look bigger so they're more noticeable, which is pretty good. And you can see the white pupils, or the sclera of the eyes, really stand out on this model, which ended up being a bit dark. And here I'm bringing in this burnt umber wash, which I'm putting on the wings to just try and tone down some of that crazy yellow that I got. And that kind of works, but it kind of just muddies it a bit. And in the end, I do kind of end up with just kind of a slightly different color from the rest of the red on the Wyvern, just not necessarily in the way I was hoping for. But I've also got some black wash I'm putting here on the base, on top of the dark stone I put down earlier. Get some of the burnt umber on the underside of the wings once the top has dried enough to not move around too much. Reapply more on the top. Just trying to blend everything in as best I can. Here I've got my uniform gray and my skeleton bone, which I use for dry brushing to get the rock texture on these. I'm mostly doing it to get the large rock sticking out of the base, though I do apply it on the rest of the base as well, just in case anything happens to show through the flocking that I use later, so that it doesn't look too out of place or whatnot. Not sure this was the best approach for that, but overall you can't really tell the difference when I'm done. I also make sure to pick out the little skull there on the base down there, and pick out the teeth that got pulled out by the contrast paint before, because the contrast paint is kind of messy, so it can be hard to not cover up little details like that sometimes, so you end up having to come in and pick them out with normal paints later. But overall, it wasn't too bad to work with for most of this. And then I'm coming in here with some pure red and just doing a bit of a dry brush on the back and wings to try and bring a bit more vibrant red color into the scales on the top, as well as try and blend the wings in again with the red of the rest of the body somewhat, because I want them to stand out, but I don't want them to be too different. And then I'm just doing the same thing with this lava orange, just a little bit more lightly, and it's a pretty subtle effect, but I do think it has a decent effect on it after the fact. It's definitely like it's hard to notice, but it's definitely doing something for the overall tone and brightness of the model. And then I just have a little bit of greedy gold to get this little bit of gold icon or whatnot sitting on the base, just making sure it fits in, and then just a little bit of burnt umber to pick out all the skulls and teeth and whatnot, and the gold just to get that looking the way I want. And then I'm just using some basic Elmer's glue. I just got it at a hardware store. And I'm trying a new flocking here as well. This is more of a strandy type fibrous flocking rather than the chunky foam stuff I have been working with before. And I do like the look of it, and I might mess around with it more in the future. Then I just blackened the base just to get that clean look that I always like. And then the last step here of covering everything in the matte Vallejo varnish. And there we go. There's the final image we're working with. This is a pretty simple paint job for a pretty great sculpt. I didn't want to do anything too crazy, and like I said, I'm not super happy with how the wing membranes turned out. I probably could have done better on that, and I might have done better to just paint over them and start fresh instead of what I tried to do, but that's how we kind of learn from our mistakes, and I'll see what I can do better in the future. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed that. I kind of enjoyed putting this one together. It was one of my more simple ones to paint, but I feel like I'm learning something. I'm playing with some new mediums and seeing what I get out of it. Some things work, some things don't, some things are salvageable, some things are okay. Overall, I'm happy enough with this one, and I'll use it. It's not like it's going to be a trash bin miniature or whatnot, so I feel like I got a good enough result out of it, but I could probably do better, and a lot of what's going on here is just me playing with new materials and techniques and seeing what comes out of it. So I do hope that you enjoyed learning those lessons with me, and if you have any comments, please put it in the comment section down below. I love hearing back from anybody who wishes to say anything to me. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. It helps out tremendously with getting the videos out there to more people. If you want to catch more of my videos in the future, please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification icon so that you will get notified whenever any of my videos go up. And if you would like to help support me, please take a look at my links below to my Etsy shop, where you can purchase some of the miniatures I put up for sale, as well as my Patreon page. And there's also a link to my Facebook page where I post updates about the channel and post when videos go up, or if I have to skip a week, that's where the notifications will go up. Also, take a look below. There will be a link to the Artisans Guild Patreon if you want to take a look at getting access to this model or other models if you have a 3D printer of your own. And with that, I hope to see everybody here again next week.